Okay.
All right. I think this should be working, but hopefully it is. I'm David Chen here at youtube.com/Dave Chensky. And I'm here today with a film report. Oh, it looks like it started in the middle. Sorry if that's the case. I'm here today with a film reporter at thewrap.com. He is my partner in crime when it comes to talking about U.S. domestic box office and the lessons that we can find within, especially for this summer. Scott Mendelson, thanks for chatting with me today.
It's a pleasure. I have missed these,
We used to
and
do
we're gonna
these
make we're
Yeah, we used to do these weekly on Twitter Spaces. I'm no longer on Twitter or X as it's called now, so we're doing them on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Dave Chensky. I do want to say thank you to all of my patrons at patreon.com/Dave Chen for making my work possible. I'll give some more shout outs for my patrons at the end of this podcast or broadcast. But Scott, today on this broadcast, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to list the top 10 movies by US domestic box office. And then we are going to talk about some lessons that we can draw from what happened this summer.
that
So
sounds good.
let's talk about what the movies are. Number one at the box office domestically, Barbie. Number two, Spider-Man Across Spider-Verse. Number three, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Number four, The Little Mermaid. Number five, Oppenheimer. Number six,
Oppenheimer just popped.
oh, just bumped up a little bit, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Six, Sound of Freedom. Seven, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Eight, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One. Nine, Transformers: Rise of the Beasts, and 10, Elemental. So that's the top 10 movies of the U.S. domestic box office this summer. There were. It's interesting to note what just missed the summer domestic box office. So those movies would be number 11, Fast 10, and number 12, The Flash. Number 13, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Mutant Mayhem. So those are the top domestic box office for summer 2023 films. I'm reading that list from Box Office Mojo. Scott Mendelson, why don't we start before we get to lessons? Let's just start by talking about overall thoughts on this slate of movies and their rankings this summer. I think it's safe to say that many people, uh, many box office prognosticators and commentators look like idiots after what happened this summer. What do you think, Scott?
I need to stop putting money on Tom Cruise one way or another. In 2017, I believed in the Dark Universe because Tom Cruise was involved. In 2022, I thought Top Gun Maverick would be thrilled to crack 500 worldwide because there's a ceiling on non-Mission Impossible pictures. And this summer, I thought that Dead Reckoning would be the biggest movie of the summer. It was not the biggest movie of the summer at all. There were some ways in which I was correctly pessimistic, like about the global, potential of the Little Mermaid. Um, I was way off on the Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One, and while I presumed that Barbie and Oppenheimer would both be successful and profitable hits, I did not see just how big they would both be concurrently. And without making this all about Barbenheimer, I think one of the best ingredients of that whole shenanigan is that rather than the world at large pitting those films against each other in some kind of proxy culture war, which I think we all expected, they celebrated both films and lifted both films up. And that's that is a reason why they both, best case scenario box office, and that's understating it. I mean, Oppenheimer is about to crack 800 million worldwide in a week or so. It's probably going to be the biggest Hollywood drama outside of Bohemian Rhapsody by the time it's done in global grosses. And Barbie, I mean, it's going to be
Scott, I think you have somehow just disconnected your audio because you just cut out halfway through your sentence. So it's going great. I can't hear you at all. Can't hear it all now. Um, for those who are just tuning in for the first time, by the way, one of the great slash worst things about these weekly broadcasts we did with Scott was there were always technical issues, and so I knew there would be technical issues, and I still can't hear you, Scott. Still can't hear you, nor can anyone in the room. So it was really uncanny. It just was like halfway through, just cut out abruptly. So don't know what was going on there. Anyway, oh, hey, yep. I think I heard a noise just now. Can't hear anything, Scott. Drew Bonner says, not only do I expect technical difficulties, I look forward to them. Indeed. We can see you, Scott. We just can't hear you, by the way. I think Scott might be like gone. Yeah, see, the thing is, Scott has a wired headset. Oh, here, something changes our foot. Changes our foot. I don't even know what's going on. Shareable Texas says, we can watch the replay of this later, yes? Will you want to, is the question. Oh. When does Bottoms come out? So Chris Iman is asking, when does Bottoms come out? I think it's in limited release right now, and it should be expanding wider next weekend. I don't know what's going on, Scott. I think you might need to refresh the window. Yep. Oh, and he's gone. And he's gone. But I think he's coming back. All right, Scott, can you hear me? We can see you, but we cannot hear you. So I think I don't know what's going on. Okay, All in the Game says, been saying for a while Scott needs to upgrade his AV situation. Sir, I have spent hours of my life working with Scott to upgrade his AV situation. What you are seeing is the culmination of all of that work, which unfortunately is not going very well. Scott, I do think a big part of it is the fact that you're using a wireless headset. I think that's messing with things. Like, it's possible that your computer like switched to the wireless headset, and now it's using the wireless, but you're like muted on the headset or something. Like that might be what's going on. Yeah, this is the optimized version. That's right. Oh, hey, I keep hearing random noises every now and then, so I don't know what's going on. I assume you've tried switching your microphone, right? Man, it was going pretty smoothly until this moment too. Like I was appreciating Scott's insights. You can see me on his little screen there too. There's me. Okay, Dambo Shaw is asking, doesn't he have to turn the mic into the down position on his headset? He's using a different microphone than the one on his headset. So, oh, it looks like he's trying to switch to his laptop, which I am not opposed to. If that can get this working. So, but hey, for folks tuning in, it's just like old times, isn't it? Like this is what you all missed. This is what you all missed, and we're bringing it to you. I am going to edit all this stuff out of the Patreon version of this, but maybe people want this. Roy says it's better than he remembered. That's great. Still cannot hear anything, Scott. You may want to. Are you trying to use the laptop? Is that what's going on? You are using the laptop. That's right. Okay, you are connecting so that was already what you were doing. I assume you've tried selecting different microphones, right? Joy says, I would like to take this opportunity to admire Scott's blazer. Did he dress up for this? The answer is yes. He did put on a nice jacket for this.
I can hear you now.
Now I can hear you. Now it just started again.
Can't hear you, but you can hear me. So that's a start.
Okay.
I'm gonna try something.
I know what's going on. Scott has selected. He has selected the Rode mic. I'm gonna call him. I'm gonna call him. I'm calling him on the phone. Here we go. Calling him on the phone. She's not answering. Maybe he put Do Not Disturb on. Yes, good. Okay, come on. We got some traction here, guys. We got some traction.
Okie dokie.
Can you
I
hear
know
me,
you
Scott?
can hear me because I see the blue thing.
Can you hear me?
The question
Can you hear
is
me?
why I can't hear you right now.
Okay, I'm trying to here, Scott. I'm trying to
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes. You can't. Yes, I can hear you. I'm trying to call you on the phone.
The only thing I have plugged in right now is my modem, my webcam, and my microphone.
Okay.
So there should be nothing.
So
there should be nothing interfering.
On your on the window that you're talking to me in, you should be able to select the input, right? Is that right?
Okay, desktop, default, microphone.
Okay. It's actually the output that you want. Sorry, the output you should be selecting.
I can barely hear the phone, ironically. Okay, what's up?
On the window that I'm in, you got to select the output. Okay. Now, where are your headphones plugged into? Are they plugged into the microphone or the computer?
They are plugged right in the microphone.
Okay, so for the output, you got to select the microphone, which is, I think, a Rode, right? Rode NT USB.
Yes.
Select output, Rode NT USB.
I'm not seeing an output option. There's communications virtual input, default desktop microphone, desktop microphone, microphone array, stream input, stream system input.
Okay.
And virtual input.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think I know what it is. Lower. You're using a Windows PC, right?
Sorry, what was that?
You're using Windows, right?
Yes.
Okay. On the lower right-hand corner of the Windows screen, there is a little speaker that you can, like a little speaker icon to change the volume, right?
How about now?
Testing 1 2. Can you hear me through the headset? No. On the lower right-hand corner of the Windows screen, there is a little speaker icon, right? Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, if you click on that, it lets you select where the sound is coming out of.
Yes, and right now it's on headphones, Rode USB Plus.
Okay, and you're still not hearing me through your headphone. Is that correct?
Talk to the microphone.
I'm talking to the microphone. You should be hearing me through your headphones, right?
No.
If the headphones is plugged into.
Here's the thing.
Yep.
It keeps automatically muting on the audio.
It keeps automatically muting the audio, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. There is a dial.
Try one more thing.
Yeah. There's a dial on the thing. Okay.
Get it?
Can you hear me? Testing 1 2.
Speakers.
Testing 1 2. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you in the phone. I cannot hear you in the computer.
Okay. Okay. I don't know what to do then. I'm surprised. The audience has actually grown for this broadcast over the last 10 minutes.
Sure. That's why I'm not concerned. I'm just frustrated because I'm half tempted just to go back to that wired headset that I used to use.
Yeah. I don't think that would be. I don't think that would be a bad thing to do that.
I swear I tested this several times yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you saw the results, and it sounded great.
Yeah. So why aren't you using a wired headset? By the way, that was my question.
Because the version that I sent you yesterday did not have one, and because I wanted something that didn't look giant like that one wireless that had a plug in it, but also I could wear my hearing aid so I wasn't screaming at you.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
let me see.
we're.
Hey, at least the webcam looks good.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, hold on. What am I unplugging here? I'm unplugging the microphone. I'm plugging in the wireless or the wired headset. Okay.
You got to hit. Why don't you hit refresh on the window, Scott?
Okay. Why it happened in the first place? Can you hear me at all?
Okay. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, now I can't hear you, but let me fix that.
Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.
Okay, I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Not through I can hear you through the computer, which might be as good as we're gonna get. Okay, here we go.
Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2.
Okay, I can hear you through the headphones. Can you hear me through this microphone?
Yes, I can, Scott.
Is it okay?
It's gonna be just fine for now. People don't understand. People watching this don't understand. I have put enormous amounts of work into getting Scott a better microphone than the one that he is using right now, which in my opinion sounds very bad. But look at this. You can see it on screen. That is an extremely high quality podcast microphone. In fact, Scott, I have an idea. Can you select that microphone as the input and still hear me on the headphones? That would be optimal if that's possible. Now you sound like a chipmunk, Scott. I don't know what's going on now. I don't know what's going on. It's freaking out now. It's freaking out now. But you were sounding amazing. Because you had unplugged the microphone. That's right. You were sounding amazing earlier with the microphone. Okay, now I can't hear you at all. Now I can't hear you at all. Did you just try plugging the microphone in? Oh. All right, Scott, you know what? We can just go back to the way it was. That's fine. Can't hear you. Can't hear you. It's not working. Maybe try refreshing. That might work. If you plugged in the microphone, try refreshing the browser window. That might work. Here we go. Here we go. All right, Scott, can you hear me?
Let's try this.
Okay.
Can you hear that?
I can hear that. I can hear that. Can you hear me?
Okay. I am going to try something different, and you're going to have to humor me.
I'm coming through your speakers, aren't I?
Yes. Wait, what? Oh, shit. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound good now. You sound good now.
Okay. The only that I am not wearing a headset. I'm not wearing headphones. I'm just using the audio coming through the computer.
Okay. I mean, it's not optimal, Scott, but we're going to have to...
It's not optimal. Now, the only thing that I can try is unplugging my Ethernet and using that.
Definitely don't do that.
Too many gadgets that do not work when they're plugged in through a third-party gimmick like this. Like this thing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. Uh,
So
let's just go with
the
it. Let's just go with
microphone
it.
only works when it's through the computer. The headphones only work when they're through the computer, and that leaves very little room for and the
Okay.
webcam only works when it's through the computer.
Everyone in the chat is saying keep it like this. So let's just keep. We're gonna keep it like this, and that's gonna be it. Okay.
That's
All
fine.
right.
I can hear you. That's not an issue.
Okay. So the let's try. The most important thing is let's try not cross talking. Let's try not talking over each other. Okay. All right. Let's be. Let's begin again. Why are you moving the mic to cover your face, Scott? Okay, whatever. Let's resume. All right. So Scott, we were just what what are you doing? It was fine the way it was before. Put it back the way it was before.
Like right in the middle of my face. Okay, that works. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay. Hey, where you going? Where you going, Scott?
You know what was never in the middle of my face, David? This little gadget.
Okay. Okay. So Scott,
Hi.
we were just talking about how people in the box office industry, they don't know anything, right? That's what you were talking about just now.
William Goldman
Moments
was right.
ago in the edit, moments ago that happened, right?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's. I think we all underestimated the sheer size of Barbie and Oppenheimer, and I think the miracle of what happened with the so-called Barbenheimer phenomenon is that instead of the two films being pitted against each other in some kind of proxy culture war thing, which I think we all kind of expected, instead people were excited for both films and were happy about both films and helped and raised both films up. And not only did the social media discourse bleed into the real world, which obviously is not something that you can predict or plan on, but the discourse around both films was mostly positive heading into opening weekend and beyond. So instead of, if you like Oppenheimer, you're this, and if you like Barbie, you're that, or if you don't like Barbie, you're a sexist or whatever, there was a mostly positive conversation about both films that celebrated their mutual success in a way that, frankly, I haven't seen in the online film world since Godzilla v. Kong saved movie theaters in early 2021.
And I would argue it's actually the first of two such events that are going to happen this year, Scott. The first one was Barbenheimer, and the second one is going to come, I think we all know already, September 29th. It's Saw Patrol. Uh,
Absolutely. My kid didn't
Saw
my
10 coming
kids
out the
did
same
not wanna
day.
see Oppenheimer because it's a 3-hour historical biopic, but they will, well, except for my youngest, of course, they will absolutely take in a double feature of Paw Patrol, the Mighty whatever the hell that movie's called. Paw Patrol, the one that stupidly isn't ripping off The Dark Knight, because that's what they should have done. Mayor Humdinger gets his ass kicked in the first film, and he panics, and he turns to creatures that he doesn't truly understand because and Chase needs to be this explained too, that some animals aren't worried about money or power. Some cats just want to watch the world burn.
Indeed. So
Meow
look
meow
out for
meow meow meow
Saw Patrol.
meow 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 meow. But yes, we will be seeing a double feature of Paw Patrol 2 and Saw X because my family is cool that way.
September 29th, folks. I like how I said, by the way, if you're not using headphones, we have to not talk over each other, but that is definitely what is happening a lot of right now. I'm dying, folks. I'm dying. Okay, so Scott, we have other than that, I would say the one other observation I'll make before we get to your lessons of summer 2023 box office is that this is one of those years where there were multiple surprises. Like some years, uh, like uh, one movie will rise to the top, and it will be like shocking, like Top Gun Maverick last year, like very surprising. No one thought that, or very few people thought that would be the number one movie of the summer. But it was by far and away the biggest one. But that was like the biggest surprise of last year. Other summers also have like one big movie that's a big surprise. Wonder Woman, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, like these are big movies that surprised when they first were released. This is a summer that had multiple surprises throughout, proving everyone wrong in multiple ways. You got movies like Across the Spider Verse doing almost double the box office the first one did. Um, you have, uh, you know, movies like Sound of Freedom beating Mission Impossible and Indiana Jones. You have Fast 10 not even making the top 10. Like there's just many surprises this summer that showed we're all fools and no one understands anything. So that's one of the big distinguishing features of the summer for me.
I think heading into the summer, and I had said this in one venue or another, this was the least predictable summer, the hardest to predict. I don't want to say in my lifetime because that's silly, but at least in the recent past. And I think everyone knew Spider Verse would kick ass because everybody loved the first one, and you had the breakout sequel mentality, and it was just a question of how big it would get. And I think we all knew Guardians would do well. And again, I think we all knew that Oppenheimer and Barbie would be successful. It was just the extent of their success was itself surprising. Um, Fast X, I would argue its domestic performance was not super surprising, but I'll be honest, what surprised me is that it performed as well worldwide as F9, despite China only giving around two-thirds of what would had been provided for F9. So the film made less in China as predicted because they didn't like the last one. Um, but it still earned about as much money. And the only reason it's not going to be super profitable is because it cost 340 to make. Now, some of that's COVID overruns, some of that's delay, some of that's just star salaries because you have like a dozen cast members that are showing up for the eighth or ninth time, give or take. That adds to the budget. Um, but as far as the positive surprises, yeah. I think obviously none of us saw Sound of Freedom coming. I think at best we thought it would perform like Breakthrough or God's Not Dead and make about 50, $60 million domestic. And that would have been a spectacular result for the $15 million acquisition. Um, Unfortunately, the film has sort of been called the QAnon movie, which isn't entirely fair to the picture. It was made in like 2017, 2018. It was supposed to be released by Fox before they got bought by Disney. And then Angel Studios picked it up and pulled their, crowd-funded, pay it forward system, which worked. I mean, every little distributor says they're going to change the way that movies are marketed and distributed, and they're going to get the fans involved. And Angel Studios actually went and did it, so kudos to them on that. Um, but the film, which I have seen, is a solid 3-star potboiler. That it's PG-13, it's not particularly salacious, um, and I think it's just a good, solid 3-star picture. And whether discourse about the people that are showing up to that film, you don't get to $180 million just by a niche fan base. So there is a certain mainstream appeal to that picture. I think partially because beyond the politics, it's a non-franchise, non-IP, non-nostalgic, old school adult skewing thriller that in itself is unique in the marketplace.
All right, Scott. Well, let's get to some of the specific lessons because I think that's going to be related to some of these topics. So Scott wrote down some lessons that I will now put on screen and we'll talk about them. All right. So here are 6 lessons from the summer box office. Number 1, more movies, more money. That was the cryptic message that Scott wrote to me as one of his top lessons. Scott, what did you mean by that?
Well, this is the first year in, quote unquote COVID times where you had a theatrical slate that was about equal in volume to what theaters had expected in pre-COVID times. And for a variety of reasons, obviously many theaters were shut down in 2020. And then in 2021, vaccines were just starting to roll out and there was still a certain hesitancy. And then in 2022, even though, big movies like Godzilla v. Kong, Spider-Man No Way Home, and then in early 2022, The Batman and Doctor Strange 2 and Top Gun Maverick, it's shown that the audience was there. the potential for pre-COVID box office, if not better than pre-COVID box office for certain movies existed, there was still a comparative paucity in theatrical slates in terms of volume where you only had about two-thirds of what theaters had expected in pre-COVID times. And as a result, overall box office was down by about a third from pre-COVID times. This year, you had about the same amount of movies, and we are about to have the same amount of money. And yes, there are certain films like Barbie that overperformed and Oppenheimer that overperformed, but in a healthy theatrical marketplace, you're always going to have that. I mean, going back to 15 years ago, most of us did not expect The Dark Knight to make $533 million domestic. Most of us did not expect the Iron Man to do 315 domestic. So you're always going to have these overperformers that boost the marketplace and make up for some would-be franchise films that flame out. That's normal. That's how the marketplace is supposed to work. And I think it's what theaters have been saying, and frankly, I've been saying for years, which is that the evidence was there that if you give theaters the volume of movies that they were accustomed to, that the box office had a shot of returning to pre-COVID normality.
Yeah, I remember when we were doing our summer movie wager on the Filmcast last year, we had a lot of difficulty coming up with 10 movies to
Yes,
put in those slots. Now that's definitely not a problem this year. So Scott, it's a good thing that there's no massive disruptions to the movie pipeline coming up soon. That's all I have to say about that. So
that would be a very tragic circumstance if certain studio figures made a conscientious choice to perhaps prioritize short-term gains over the long-term health of the industry in a way that caused another situation where you had infrequent theatrical releases and large theatrical gaps in a marketplace that otherwise would be healthy for no good reason.
that would not only be silly, it would be completely a foreseeable self-own.
It would
Because of
be.
because of literally what we as a society have just experienced. So it's a really good thing that nothing like that is going to happen soon.
And,
Um,
that would really suck because or stink because unfortunately, unlike 2020 or 2021, you can't even blame, oh, we need to put all our eggs in the streaming basket because we know that Wall Street doesn't want that anymore. So
Indeed.
there's no upside to such a disruption. So it'd be even twice as stupid.
Let's get to our next lesson. A blockbuster can come from anywhere. Lesson number 2 for summer 2023 box
Even
office.
a cop dedicated to rescuing victims of human trafficking, putting a coat on a rescued victim to assure that young boy that his world hadn't completely ended.
So Scott, what this lesson is in reference to Sound of Freedom. You've already talked about it a little bit, but what Sound of Freedom does show is that through a combination of canny marketing and word of mouth, as well as this fairly innovative, I have to say, pay it forward buying ticket scheme, you can beat some of the biggest names in the business at U.S. domestic box office, right?
Yes, and let me just I know there's been a lot of conversation about the extent to which the Sound of Freedom theatrical box office was quote unquote astroturfed with people buying tickets and not showing up in theaters. To the extent that that's true, I don't know. The people I've spoken to seem to think that it's, within the margin of error, maybe 5-10%. And, I've certainly bought a ticket using my AMC A list and then just changed my mind and not canceled the reservation. Ooh.
Yeah, it's true that there have been viral videos of Sound of Freedom sold out Sound of Freedom screenings that have been empty, but I don't think anyone is saying that the box office is fraudulent in some way. Like whatever
No,
the box office is, that money was paid for by someone, right?
exactly.
So
And my feeling is as long as theaters are getting the money, meh. The only people being harmed are box office pundits like me that now look stupid because my number one pick of the summer, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, got outgrossed by Sound of Freedom.
indeed,
But, I
indeed.
can take it.
Anything else about a blockbuster can come from anywhere, or shall
Well,
we move
yeah,
on
I
to the
mean,
next?
we spent much of the year debating about, what's the and this is another lesson, so forgive me for overlapping, but, Indiana Jones is gonna be the next Top Gun Maverick. because it was kind of like Top Gun in terms of nostalgia and 80s appeal and an elderly action star kicking ass. And oh, no, The Flash is going to be the next Top Gun Maverick because it's got the big CinemaCon debut and everybody at CinemaCon loved it, et cetera, et cetera. And no, what was the next Top Gun Maverick? The next Top Gun Maverick was Barbie, a film that had as little to do with Top Gun Maverick as Barbie had to do with Oppenheimer. Just in the same way that the next Harry Potter was Twilight, a film that had very little in common with Harry Potter. And the next Twilight was The Hunger Games, another film that had very little in common with Twilight. As I've been saying this for as long as I've been writing, you make more money on the first Harry Potter than on trying to find the next Harry Potter. And Barbie was huge, partially because it was the first Barbie. Um, and
Fair enough.
conversely,
Yeah.
yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
we
So
think of
just
a no, go
people
ahead.
think
Sorry.
they know what it is a bad practice to try to predict the next big thing based on the previous big thing. It's going to be a
Yes,
thing that you didn't see coming, or it's going to be slightly different than what it was before. So,
yes,
all right, let's move.
and
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
when you think of a stereotypical blockbuster, you think of a big budget, four quadrant, male focused fantasy action franchise title. And you can, and no matter how many exceptions that we have to that, and I don't even want to call them exceptions, so forgive me. Wonder Woman, Frozen, Mamma Mia, Twilight, Sex of the City, Hidden Figures, etc., etc., etc. That conventional wisdom still stands. I did not say this, and I don't know who did say this, but this quote has always stuck with me, which is that what actually makes money is less powerful than the conventional wisdom of what makes money. And conventional wisdom said that the next Top Gun Maverick was going to be another boy targeted, nostalgic fantasy action franchise title. Barbie is not that. There is one action scene in that film and it involves Nerf toys. And unless
Indeed.
I was missing, unless I missed something, there are no killings in that picture. I mean, if
Well,
they
that
want to
brings
put
us to
out
the
the R-rated
next.
Blu-ray cut, I'll watch it. But
That brings us to the next lesson, which is number 3. The next Top Gun was nothing like Top Gun.
yeah, and it's
Several people, including yourself, thought that Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning would draft off of the goodness of Top Gun. I thought it would do just fine. I thought it would be at least as good as Fallout. But
the problem is the movie
Mission
wasn't as
Impossible,
good as Fallout. But that's a different conversation.
yeah, the movie itself was not as good as Fallout, so that's a big problem. But
Um,
that
I
Mission
think.
Impossible. Here, let me set this up, Scott.
Sorry,
Then
go
I'm
ahead.
happy to hear you talk for many minutes. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One only grossed around $166 million at summer this year. That is, I think, around 50-60 million lower than Fallout, and widely viewed as a disappointment given how well Top Gun Maverick did last year. People thought, oh, maybe people are going to want to get back in the theater for more Tom Cruise. Even disappointing if you're a Mission Impossible fan because the franchise trajectory seemed to be trending positively. So Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part One didn't do that well. Many potential reasons for it, including that, in my opinion, it wasn't nearly as good as Fallout. Scott Mendelson, what's your postmortem on this?
Well, I mean, in my subjective opinion, I think the film was maybe the worst in the franchise. It's the first one that I have not liked since part three, although I am willing to give all parties the benefit of the doubt, considering that it was made during the COVID pandemic with lots of stops and starts in the production. And I will absolutely assume that any issues I had with the storytelling and the plotting was them trying to do the best job they could under impossible circumstances. Um, that being said, I think I underestimated the extent to which Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning would be treated like, and this is what I think was the issue with a lot of Deadpool's this year, is like, remember in 2016 where we had a bunch of franchise flops that were installments in once were special series like X-Men and Independence Day, Ghostbusters, Star Trek, etc., etc. I think that's what happened this year. This year you had The Flash, Indiana Jones, Transformers, which was not a flop, but it cost too much. And these were mighty franchises that were now just sort of that week's court-appointed tentpole. And in that sense, those films underwhelming was not surprising to me. However, I was incorrect in thinking that Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning would play at a level above that and would be more exciting to general moviegoers than those other films because, Top Gun, Goodwill and Mission Impossible, Goodwill, et cetera. And I was wrong. It did make more than those pictures, not by much, but I think globally, I think it did play in the same sandbox where it was, oh, another one of these.
I'm right there with you, Scott. You and I are some of the only people in our little film community that reviewed Dead Reckoning Part One negatively, and
You're
so
right.
we are.
History will judge us correctly.
History will. We'll see. Maybe Dead Reckoning Part Two is going to bring it all back.
Oh, absolutely. Benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and I'll say I didn't review it. I wasn't quite as negative as Scott. I gave it a mixed review. You can
Fair.
read about it at my website, decodingeverything.com. But okay, let's get to lesson number 4. Warner Brothers needs to stop making DC the center of its universe. Scott, we
This is
had two DC Universe movies come out this summer prominently. There was The Flash and also Blue Beetle. Both of those movies did very poorly. The Flash, I think, opened with around $55 million. It's only barely cracked 100, despite costing, I think, over $200 million, right? Around that much, not counting marketing. Blue Beetle, as we're recording this, is in the 30s. That movie cost over $100 million. There is no more interest from audiences in the DC universe, I don't think. Shazam earlier this year also tanked. There's still an Aquaman sequel theoretically going to come out this December. I have no idea how that's going to do, but I don't feel good about it because literally the last 3 DC movies have bombed, and I have not seen a lick of marketing for Aquaman 2 yet out in the wild, other than maybe the poster. So, Scott, what's your diagnosis of Warner Brothers and DC?
Well, this is unfortunately something that I've been saying since 2016, which is that the discourse around the DC films, DC studios, DC universe, call it whatever you want, has become so toxic and divisive that it overshadows Warner Brothers' successes everywhere else. For example, in 2017, they got Dunkirk to $525 million worldwide. They got It, an R-rated horror film about a murder clown, to $700 million worldwide. And you know what? They got Wonder Woman to 800 million with rave reviews worldwide. But they were still defined by the chaos that ensued and the poor reception commercially and critically to Justice League. Um, and in 2018, they just had a banger year. They had A Star Is Born. They had The Meg. They had Fantastic Beasts 2, which despite poor reviews still made 650 worldwide. They had Crazy Rich Asians. They had Ocean's 8. They had Tag. They had Game Night. They had The Nun, to the point where Aquaman making $1.1 billion was almost just the cherry on top of the sundae. Um, and even this year, they got Barbie, which made it's going to make $1.5 billion. They got Evil Dead Rise, a film that was supposed to be on HBO Max, and they got, I think, the biggest Evil Dead movie ever by a healthy margin. But nonetheless, in the press, they will still be defined by whether or not, by the fate of their DC films. Imagine how much better and again, this might have been impossible considering the circumstances. Imagine how much better the narrative would be for Warner Brothers if they had said going in the summer that we've seen Barbie and it's fucking awesome, instead of saying The Flash is the best superhero movie ever made or whatever. And again, I get David Zaslav saying that. I almost kind of get James Gunn saying that. I love to know what that Tom Cruise was talking about when, how he was convinced to speak up about that. I mean, that came off like James Cameron plugging the latest Terminator sequel. Now, I'm always in the James Cameron fan club, but the one time you do bet against James Cameron is when he's talking about a Terminator sequel.
Well, great rundown of Warner Brothers' great victories over the last few years, Scott. One of their failures was the fact that their decision making around what was called Project Popcorn at the time, the decision to release all movies on HBO Max simultaneously in theaters, drove away Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan left Warner Brothers, went to Universal, and then immediately turns around and delivers Oppenheimer, one of the biggest films of the year. That movie's going to be spitting out millions of dollars for years. Like, that is a cultural event. There's going to be, we haven't even gotten to the PVOD window yet. Like, there's going to be PVOD, there's going to be IMAX re-releases, there's going to be all this stuff down the line for that movie. Warner Brothers could have had 2 of the biggest films of the year. But instead, they have Barbie and then, whatever else they have, but, like, they let Christopher Nolan go because of some really terrible communications and
Um,
decision making,
I
and,
have
that's a
some
bummer.
sympathy for Warner Brothers. First of all, I think Project Popcorn was possibly a necessary evil that in its own skewed way may have saved movie theaters
Mhm.
because it gave theaters the knowledge
Yeah,
that they would
it
have
gave
a
them product, which they didn't have
yeah, it gave
otherwise.
them a
Yeah.
reliable slate of big deal product, and I don't think without Project Popcorn, they released Godzilla v. Kong and Mortal Kombat as early in the year as they do, and those films were absolutely, essential in giving us a summer movie season in 2021. Um,
Fair enough.
and
Yeah, you're right. Putting aside the Wisdom Project Popcorn, whatever they
yeah,
did, they didn't do enough to smooth things over with Christopher Nolan, right? And as a result, he ended up leaving the studio.
and
So,
again,
um,
knowing that Tenet still made 350 million worldwide, released in the heart of COVID, and had for better or worse, theaters in New York and LA been open as expected when that movie came out, I think it would have done the thing that Nolan we all thought it was going to do, which was jumpstart the theatrical industry a lot earlier than what ended up happening. Again, I'm not going to get into what's basically a civil war between the two of them, but I think I don't think I take issue with the idea that Warner Brothers did everything wrong with Tenet and chased off Nolan. I think they released the film in as late in the summer as they could. Globe overseas, I think it did terrific, and I hope that they can mend the fences.
that's not my perception is not Nolan feels like they mishandled Tenet. That's not my
Yeah, yeah,
perception. My perception is that it was Project Popcorn and the poor way in which it was communicated with creative
yeah,
people
and that's
that
fair.
created the problem. So
Um,
anyway, but regardless,
Here's the question:
um, yeah,
if Oppenheimer is just another Warner Brothers picture alongside Barbie, and you don't have Barbenheimer and everything positive that that becomes, do either films do as well as they ended up doing?
it's a really good
Well,
question because
in
if
a
Warner Brothers,
crazy ass way that none of us could have predicted, Christopher Nolan owes Barbie and Warner Brothers at least a small portion of Oppenheimer's success.
perhaps because if Warner Brothers did have control of Oppenheimer, they would not have released it on the same date as Barbie. That would not have
Mm-mm.
happened, right? So who knows? It's a question for the ages. Uh, all eyes now turn to Aquaman 2 and whether or not that's going to do any well. But really, not all eyes. Some eyes turn to Aquaman 2. All eyes are on
I still believe in James Wan.
James Gunn's Superman Legacy is going to be the big reboot that the DC universe needs. So much is riding on that film, which I think is currently slated to release 2025, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes,
So
July 11th, 2025.
yeah, assuming the strike doesn't last until then. So uh, we'll see. But this DC universe is stick a fork in it. It's dead. Like no audiences do not care anymore. So
With the
uh,
caveat that I would argue that they were doing well prior to COVID. And I think the biggest problem they've had is the constant change up in leadership structure. And often, what I would argue are 180-degree corporate edicts that treated DC like a hot potato, whatever. It is telling how badly the DC brand has fallen just in the last few years that Aquaman The Lost Kingdom, a sequel to a $1.1 billion critical success that people liked. They saw it, they loved it, it was leggy as hell. And the sequel to that film, with all of the same talent coming back, is considered a box office underdog.
Yash in the chat says Aquaman could play like Avatar. Yash, let's check back in here in 4 months
Oh
and
God, because I
see.
mean, again, Occam's razor would be it's being released in December, like the first Aquaman. It's a big year-end fantasy franchise tentpole of the year. Everybody liked Aquaman, and the film is going to be sold as its own thing. It's not going to be part of a DC universe that no longer exists. Occam's razor would be that it still does fine because all the ingredients are there. And I maybe I'm an idiot, but I still believe.
All right, Scott, let's get to the fifth lesson. Disney is in deep trouble. That's your fifth lesson. Tell us about this. What are the Disney movies that came out this summer? Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 did very well. That's a
Yes.
Marvel film. Over 350 domestic. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, not as good. didn't crack 200, and it cost well over 200. Elemental originally debuted pretty poorly, but legged it out to 150. Ended up doing better than Lightyear, but not a massive success because Pixar movies are just really expensive. And then Haunted Mansion also did around $60 million. Not very good. So out of all of those movies, basically the only one that could be considered unequivocally a success is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, right? So out of four, only one of them was successful, really.
It's worth noting that Disney is a huge company that has many revenue streams. Um, and again, just because they're in trouble doesn't mean I think they're going to shrivel up and die. These are challenges to be problems to be solved, challenges to be overcome. However, Bob Iger's legacy is one of acquisition. He bought Pixar, he bought Lucasfilm, he bought Marvel, he bought Fox. In the time that he was the CEO of Disney the first time, they didn't have a single new to cinema live action theatrical franchise that would be considered successful. It's been 20 years since Pirates of the Caribbean. It's been 19 years since National Treasure. They've been trying and failing so long that they've done two failed attempts to turn the Haunted Mansion into a franchise. And now that the live action remake of the Disney Toon franchise has basically peaked, and even The Little Mermaid can't pull Maleficent numbers, let alone Lion King numbers. That is a subgenre that is not going to be as big as it's not going to be one of their surefire brands that it was for the last several pre-COVID years.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention Little Mermaid actually did well as well.
It did
297
well, it
domestic.
cost too much, and
Yeah,
just like
297
Solo of
domestic.
Star Wars. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, but $297 million domestic, 568 worldwide. But it was very expensive, and as you point out, Scott, it did not do as well as previous live action remakes,
And
right?
I'd like to say something just because, it's there was Disney tried to sell the idea that The Little Mermaid flopped overseas because of racism, because user polls were being gamed or whatever nonsense. Look, racial bias exists. Racism is a fact, just like gravity. That being said, The Little Mermaid bombed overseas for the same reason Solo: A Star Wars Story and Lightyear did, which is that the film had nothing to offer to overseas audiences for those that did not were not already on board with, hey, it's a live action remake of The Little Mermaid. There was no star power. There was nothing weird or interesting going for it. It was just, oh, it's this movie that you already saw in live action. And because that IP is not particularly strong in outside of North America, the film struggled outside of North America. Again, same thing with Solo: A Star Wars Story, same thing with Lightyear, same year with Ghostbusters Answer the Call, and Ghostbusters Afterlife for that matter, but that film was cheaper, so it was still successful. Um, you know, we have spent 20, 15, 20 years fighting the conventional wisdom that non-white movies cannot be successful overseas. You and I have had these conversations countless times. Black Panther did very well in China. Dwayne Johnson movies kick ass overseas. Um, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But because one big Disney movie did poorly overseas, you had those same people affirming the conventional wisdom that, movies with black people can't do well overseas. And it pissed me off so badly back in May
Yes.
because
Well,
that wasn't what happened.
if you have
And
one
there's
takeaway from what Scott has to say, it's always question the narrative that you're
yes,
being presented when it comes to box office success. So, okay, so they actually had two quote unquote successes, right? Little Mermaid and Guardians of the Galaxy. So I apologize for getting that wrong.
well, no, Little
Um,
Mermaid still lost
but
money. It's not a
y-
success. It made 550 worldwide on a 250 budget. It'll probably make money in the long run, but
yeah,
nobody loves it. It's not that kind of hit.
it's not like Lion King level success, which
Yes,
made
or
I think
Aladdin, which was popular,
yeah, Lion King $1.6 billion worldwide. Little
which was
Mermaid is not
propelled
even going to crack.
overseas, Aladdin, by noted non-white man Will Smith.
Mhm. So, anyway, in your estimation, Disney's in rough shape because they
Because with
are
the animation
they
sorry, go
yeah
ahead, I
they
apologize.
used to be able to create original franchises.
Yes,
They have since then leaned heavily on older remakes of stuff, and now even the remakes aren't working. So like they have trouble launching new franchises. Like we've seen Elemental did okay, not great. Jungle Cruise, not a huge success. Like Haunted Mansion, not a huge success. And then even their live action remakes are doing badly, right? So like they're not in good shape. The future is a little bit bleak when it comes to
They have
the
become,
Disney
as
creative group.
frankly, you and I'm sure myself and other people have written about, even prior to COVID, they have now become almost entirely reliant on a theatrical level on the MCU. And
Yeah.
even that is no longer the surefire brand that it was in pre-COVID times. Um,
Yeah, we'll see
and I
how the
want,
Marvels does when it opens this November. It's going to
which
have a
looks
little bit.
absolutely delightful. So I'm optimistic.
It has a little bit more breathing room because Dune 2 has been delayed.
Yes,
So we'll see. All right, Scott, shall we get to our sixth and final lesson for today?
sure.
Before we get to our sixth and final lesson, I want to say a huge shout out to all of my patrons at patreon.com/DaveChen. Specifically, Scott, I have a few names I just want to read, if that's cool with you. Um, I want to say a big thanks to Kevin and Faye and Ian, Stephen, David, Sid, Stephen, Kwong, Robert, Dan, Jeff, and Mark for backing me at the executive producer level. And really appreciate your support and making extremely technically sophisticated broadcasts like this possible. Scott Mendelson, where can people find your work on the internet before we get to our sixth and final lesson
I am
for
at
today?
the rap.com. I am still technically on X at Scott Mendelson. I just don't use it as much as I used to. I'm on Facebook. That's mostly for bad jokes and family photos. I'm on Blue Sky, but is anyone actually active on Blue Sky these days?
I
If
check
you
Blue Sky
are,
pretty regularly.
come find me.
Have you thought about getting on Threads, Scott?
Is Threads good?
I wouldn't say it's good, but it's better than X, in my opinion.
That's
Anyway,
fair.
if there was any hope of me returning to Twitter, that hope vanished when the site became X because a sentence you will never hear me utter, other than as an example, like what I'm about to say, is you can find me on X at such and such. That is not a sentence I plan to ever say in my entire life.
I mean, because
But
if you're a person who stutters, and obviously no judgment, and you say that, you could send a very different message.
okay, fair enough. Mine didn't even go there, Scott. But that's why I love chatting with you because I love where your head goes. Okay. The sixth and final lesson from the summer 2023 domestic box office. Audiences want new stuff with familiar brands. That is what the sixth and final lesson is. So, what is that referring to? I mean, there's a few things that Scott sent me this lesson. We didn't talk these over in advance, but the things that come to mind, of course, are Super Mario Brothers movie didn't come out this summer, but it came out earlier this year. It's going to be the number 2 film of the year unless something later, unless Aquaman or the Marvels unseats it. Um, we got Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, very familiar IP, but a brand new spin. Barbie, obviously, massively successful, the number 1 film of the year. And then the other thing, I think there's one other title that kind of falls into this category. But yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant
Yes.
Mayhem. Very familiar property, but with like a really fresh, fun spin that seems like it's going to be financially successful in the end. Scott, what was behind this lesson for you?
Well, I mean, when a movie, when a lot of the punditry around Barbie is the idea is, oh, or in the other films, like Flash that didn't do well, is, oh, people want originality. They want exciting new stories. And it's like, no, they don't want originality. I've been doing this for 15 years. I wish they did, but they don't. But they will gravitate toward original, and I hate to say the word content, so forgive me, but original content within established brands. So yes, it's a Spider-Man movie, but Across the Spider-Verse does things and shows you things and goes places that are new and original for that genre and for that, IP. Barbie is Barbie, but like the Lego movie almost 10 years ago, we're old. Um, it works as a deconstruction of its brand, a celebration of its brand, and in the case of Barbie, it's a pretty solid example of feminism 101. Um, and that is an interesting way to make a Barbie movie. Um, Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. And frankly, one reason why the Ninja Turtles property is as vibrant as it is it's always it's never goes away for too long. B, and this is a good lesson for IP in general, when it gets rebooted into a new TV show or a new movie or even a new video game, it targets the young fans, the new fans first, without prioritizing the nostalgic fans that are my age. So a film like Mutant Mayhem is not chasing the 40 something year olds like me that grew up on the 80s cartoon. They are chasing the people that are young enough that maybe this is their first Ninja Turtles. Um, and Mutant Mayhem is new. It's interesting. It visually, it's unlike anything you've ever seen in a modern Hollywood cartoon. It has the turtles voiced by actual teenagers and recording in the same booth together. And without going into details on how the film ends, the status quo that is presented at the end of that picture is, to my knowledge, something that I've never seen in the Ninja Turtles franchise. And as a result, I am excited to see where the sequel goes. So, yes, moviegoers are still gravitating to the familiar brands, familiar franchises, familiar characters. But, and this was always the lesson of the Lego movie, there is a place to experiment and be creative and be original within that known sandbox. And this is what Disney used to do really well in the mid 2010s. I don't love Maleficent. I think it's a prop. I don't think it works as a movie. But I love the fact that they took Maleficent and made "I Spit on Your Grave" for kids. Um, I love the fact that they took Black Panther, this $200 million Walt Disney tentpole, and made it a film implicitly about how America is so fucking institutionally racist that a young black boy abandoned there without his family will become a supervillain, almost as a matter of fact. Um, and so or something like the protection of the Pixar brand, you get imaginative and wonderful and yes diverse pictures like Inside Out and Coco and Soul, and they use the protection of those brands to say, okay, we know people are going to show up. Let's give them something that they haven't seen before, and that's where I think separates the Barbies from the Indiana Jones. Even to a certain extent, I would argue Oppenheimer, which is a World War II era historical biopic, but either you've never seen anything like this before, or you're old enough to say, God, I haven't seen anything like this since Oliver Stone was kicking ass in the 90s. So it makes the old feel new again.
All fair points, Scott. And I think I agree with you. That does seem to be the biggest trend this summer. Old things turned new again, fresh spin, different way of looking at it, different way of tackling the material. This is what is doing really, really well with audiences this summer. I can't wait until we write that into our memories, only for it all to change next summer. Okay, Scott, a couple final comments in the chat that I just want to get to before we wrap up. First of all, Rahul in the chat mentions "Talk to Me." He says "Talk to Me" was a surprise hit this summer for A24. I agree. Uh, One of my favorite films this summer. I thought it was great. I can't wait to watch it again. Just a great low budget horror film that I think people have already expressed that they've enjoyed a lot, and it's having like everything everywhere all at once style drops from week to week, like just very very. I think it dropped like 36% this weekend. Very very low drop from week to week for a horror film, doing very well. Galliot Productions writes, Sup, Dave? Non-Kino here. The one bright spot for Warner Brothers and DC is that Superman Legacy does have Joker 2 and Batman Part 2 to cushion them for 2024 and 2025. Uh,
Yes.
that is true. Joker 2 is coming out. Batman Part 2 will come out. Joker made $1 billion. Batman made hundreds of millions domestically. I think these are movies that are the sequels to those will probably do pretty well because unlike, let's say, Fast 9 and Fast 10, right? People really like the last one, right? Same with Aquaman 2, but we'll see how that plays out. Any predictions as to how, like, will people still care about Joker 2? Will people still care about Matt Reeves Batman the Batman
I
Part 2? What do you
think
think, Scott?
Joker 2 is going to be one of those sequels that underperforms with quotes by only doing about as well as we expected the first film to do. There is going to be a drop because you're not going to have it's not going to be plenty of folks were just curious the first time. Plenty of folks saw Joker, did not like Joker, and are not going to see a sequel. And also, when Joker came out, it was in a unique position where that October, it was the scary movie of the season. It was the commercial Oscar buzz film of the season. It was the babysitter worthy adult skewing picture of the season. And it was the franchise picture of the season, all in one package. I'm going to assume that Joker 2 is not going to have as much of a monopolization of the marketplace as the first film did because of that. That being said, if you're going to do a sequel to Joker, making it a musical with Lady Gaga as, I assume, Harley Quinn is absolutely the way to go. Do I
Yeah,
care about another Joker movie in the abstract? No. Will I see a $150 million comic R-rated comic book musical with Lady Gaga? Hell yeah.
and as Nick in the chat says, Joker and Batman also follow the idea of old reimagined as new. So I think fitting in right with lesson 6 there that in Scott's book. So we'll see. We have every reason to be optimistic about those movies specifically. Uh,
Um,
yeah.
a slight comment. First of all, Talk to Me is awesome. You're correct. It was a light summer for horror just because there weren't that many horror pictures. But the ones that did break out, like Insidious 5, which became the biggest Insidious ever, and Talk to Me did play. I think, everybody talks, horror is still bankable, horror is still bankable. I think a big reason for that is that horror fans show up and they tell their friends, and there is a comparatively niche but reliable network of horror centric media that lets the fans and moviegoers know about what's coming in a way that isn't there for, say, live action comedies. There were a lot of comedies this summer, many of them very good. None of them really broke out. And I think, unfortunately, the problem, which we now know, is that audiences get their comedy from funny franchises like Scream, like Super Mario Brothers, like Barbie, like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And so they don't need to go to just straight up comedies to get their cinematic knee slappers. That's unfortunate, but I think that's what we're dealing with right now.
Alrighty. Well, Scott Mendelson, I think that's it. I think we can call it on this broadcast and on the summer 2023 U.S. domestic box office. Surely one of the podcasts we have done is this one.
Is what?
I, I said, of all the broadcasts we have done, this was one of them. That's what I said.
Well, I'll tell you what. If and when, and hopefully if, this will be the setup they'll go through from the start.
I would like to make some changes to it, but we'll give that a shot later. Hey, as we close out here, um, the reason I get to do experiments like this with folks like Scott is because of my patrons at patreon.com/Dave Chen. So a huge thanks to all the patrons for making my work possible. And subscribe to this YouTube channel to see updates like this one when we go live in the future. We would like to get on a more regular cadence with these with Scott. I was waiting until we got all the technical elements in place, and clearly that is already done. So we'll see if we can increase the frequency of these in the future. But in the meantime, you can subscribe to my newsletter, decodingeverything.com. That's free for all, and you can always I'm easy to reach. Let us know if you want us to do more of these in the future. We'd appreciate it. I want to give a big shout out to Scott. Always appreciate his insight, even if I don't always agree, which is actually very often that I don't agree, but I always find him worth considering. So, Scott Mendelson, thank you for the chat today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me back. And to those who are listening, thank you for humoring us with the technical difficulties.
What
They were
technical
mostly my
difficulties?
fault. Ha ha ha. And to be fair, it's been 8 months.
All right, folks.